Starkville teacher taking her expertise to the State Board of Education. We'll talk to this veteran teacher about the role just ahead. And a first-of-its-kind drug for autism. We'll look at that. Plus, newly released Johnny Cash music. Mid-morning starts right now.
WCBI's Mid-Morning with Aundrea, breaking away from your everyday.
Good morning, everyone. Our first guest today spends her days surrounded by the most eager students of all, kindergarten pupils. Now, Sudduth Elementary School kindergarten teacher Brittney Rye has been appointed by Governor Bryant to the State Board of Education as its school teacher representative. Brittney joins us this morning at the table. Brittney, thank you for being here.
Thank you for
and
having
congratulations
me.
On the appointment.
Thank you so much.
What was your reaction when you found out that the governor had chosen you for this position?
It was very overwhelming. It was very humbling, and for a long time I really just couldn't get off the cloud of, here I am, this little old kindergarten teacher in Starkville, Mississippi, that's been recognized for, you know, just my commitment to education and my passion for education. So
I know that probably your first year of service will be a lot of learning for you because it's a 9-year term, right?
Yes, it is.
But what is your role as a teacher representative? I will tell you, I had no idea there was a teacher-specific representative on the state school board.
Right, and I guess I think a lot of people didn't know, just like you're aware of, because the person who sits in that position is there for 9 years. So it's been a while since one has been appointed. But basically, you're in there to be able to give feedback and knowledge of how policies and procedures are going to affect the classroom, because sometimes the view of what really is going to happen and exactly what that's going to look like isn't seen by other people who may think that it's a good policy. So really needing to know exactly, will this work in a classroom? Is this going to be something that classroom teachers can do? And also, I think bringing awareness of concerns that there may be happening that we really need to address and look at.
I really think you can go down there also and sort of be an advocate for teachers when you're in that role.
Yes, and I'll say, when you get put in that position, a lot of people do start saying, hey, when you get down there,
make sure we get a raise.
Yes, or make sure you advocate for this.
Yes.
So I really am anxious, though, to kind of get through that first learning curve, because it's going to be something that there's a lot of things I'm not aware of and not sure of how that's going to or what's going to happen. So I'm anxious to get through that part and maybe really start feeling my groove and being able to be a voice and speak out for teachers.
As a kindergarten teacher for almost 2 decades, you are well aware of the importance of early childhood development and children going to school as early as 4 years old. And I know the Starkville School District is adding 2 pre-K classes. So what's your message then to the board, the people who will be making decisions about early childhood?
Well, I will say that when I went down and met with Governor Bryant in the Senate, Governor Bryant has a passion for early childhood education. You know, that's become something that is they're very involved in trying to improve early childhood education. And as a kindergarten teacher, you see the value in students that are coming in that have been serviced in a very qualified education environment. So that initiative is top priority at the state board level. And I know that being in kindergarten now for 17 years, I see where there's a lot of difference and a lot of change, and what children coming in to get a good quality start in kindergarten need to have and be prepared to be able to do.
You know, even I can remember when kindergarten was not mandated for the state of Mississippi. In fact, when I started school, I started at first grade because there was no statewide kindergarten program. There's a big difference even from kids who started at 5 years old versus, you know, me starting at almost 7.
Right. Well, and even now in the state of Mississippi, kindergarten is not mandatory, but it is.
It's not mandatory.
It's not. Children do not have to attend kindergarten. It's just now there is such a push for it, and all schools provide one that parents do start them in kindergarten. I can't imagine not coming to kindergarten and going straight into first grade, because even just preschool to kindergarten, there's a gap there, and just that the environment is so different. It is so much more structured, and the expectations are so much higher. Just when I started teaching kindergarten in 2000, what we do now, I mean, we're
like colors and shapes,
right? It was. We learned a letter a week, and we learned our colors and our shapes, and now we've learned all of our letters and sounds by December, and we're reading at this point, and we're writing.
That's fantastic.
But it's amazing what the kids are able to do, you know.
Well, the Starkville School District is obviously very proud of you. It's an honor, and they're also happy that this role is not going to take you out of the classroom, right?
Yes, right.
Okay.
Well, one of the one of the qualifications that you have to have in order to serve in this position is still being in the classroom and being able to bring that perspective to the table.
All right, well, we know you will do well. Come back and see us after some meetings, okay?
I will. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, when we come back, a new crash test looks at the safety of rear-facing seats for children. Mid-morning, we'll be right back. Welcome back. Car seats can protect a child, of course, during a front or side crash. Well, now researchers are looking at how they perform when a driver is hit from the rear. Laura Podesta reports.
In 2016, Heather Hope was driving home with her 16-month-old daughter, Anastasia, when another vehicle hit and flipped her car. Heather was killed, but her baby, who was strapped in a rear-facing car seat like this one, survived with minor injuries. Heather's family said she'd been very careful to pick out a safe seat.
It paid off, and I'm so thankful, and I know she would be so happy knowing that her daughter is still here with us.
Studies show rear-facing seats can be highly effective in front and side collisions. But researchers at The Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center wanted to see how they perform in rear accidents when the child is facing the impact of the crash.
We wanted to just kind of run this test and see what happened with the crash test dummies.
Study author Julie Mansfield conducted tests on multiple rear-facing seats. All were effective at absorbing the force of the crash and protecting the child.
Those crash forces are going to be transferred from the shell of the car seat into the vehicle seat and into the frame of the vehicle, and that keeps the crash energy away from the occupant himself.
The American Academy of Pediatrics says parents should keep their toddlers in rear-facing seats until they are 2 years old or when they reach the maximum height and weight.
The rear-facing seat does a really good job of keeping the head, neck, and spine aligned and supported.
And that can save a child's life. Laura Podesta, CBS News, New York.
There is hope this week with promising research for families with children on the autism spectrum. Right now, 1 in 68 children are diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder, but there's no drug yet to treat the core symptoms. Kenneth Craig has more on this first-of-its-kind study.
In the same school at all.
15-year-old Marshall Scarpula is one of 3 children in his family with autism. His mother noticed some of the signs when he was 3 years old.
His speech was delayed, and then the school brought it to my attention, too.
Now, researchers at Montefiore Medical Center are studying whether a first-of-its-kind drug could make a difference for kids like Marshall.
There aren't any approved treatments for what we think of as the core symptoms of autism. So all of the social difficulties and the repetitive behaviors and the ability to function in everyday life.
I'm forgetting something, I would write myself a note.
Marshall is part of a nationwide clinical trial which includes 300 children and teens with high-functioning autism.
Stop.
Researchers are testing whether the drug, balovaptan, can help autism symptoms by preventing a molecule thought to influence social behavior from binding to brain receptors. Previous research on adults showed symptoms improved. Dr. Eric Hollander says this drug could be one piece of the puzzle.
There would still be a need for things like speech therapy or occupational therapy, educational interventions, behavioral interventions.
Marshall's family doesn't know yet whether he received a placebo or the actual drug.
I have this thing that helps me keep on task.
But his mother says she's seen a change in his behavior.
It must be promising for you.
Yes. Hopefully it gets approved and everything goes through and we'll have a medicine for him.
A possible breakthrough for autism and a chance for a fuller life. Kenneth Craig, CBS News, New York.
Researchers are enrolling high-functioning children and teenagers at this time because they can better communicate about their symptoms. Several hospitals across the U.S. are testing a new treatment that could help people suffering with ALS. Malika Marshall has more from Boston.
Stiffness.
Yeah.
41-year-old David Newfagleis was a healthy family man and mechanical engineer when he started noticing constant twitching in his arm. After months of tests, the devastating diagnosis came back last January as ALS.
Hearing a doctor say it, it takes your breath away. You think about all your hopes and dreams for the future and your family and your career and your everything, and it puts all those in question.
Life suddenly shifted for David, his wife, and their 3 daughters. ALS, which is also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, is progressive and there's no cure. Most patients die within 3 to 5 years, so David was open to any potential treatments. His doctors told him about a clinical trial at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston testing a new stem cell technology. The treatment from Brainstorm Cell Therapeutics uses the patient's own stem cells. They're multiplied and matured to make them behave more like brain cells, then injected back into the patient where the cells help repair the brain and spinal cord. Researchers hope the treatment can decrease brain inflammation that causes worsening of ALS.
These stem cells from people's own bodies can act as anti-inflammatory, like an anti-inflammatory drug.
The disease has already affected David's balance and his hand movements, but he says he's grateful to take part in the study.
My hope for this trial is that finally ALS patients have a powerful weapon they can fight their disease with.
He gets injections every 8 weeks and is encouraged about what the treatment could do for him and others. Dr. Malika Marshall, CBS News, Boston.
About 200 people are being recruited to take part in the clinical trial. 3 previous smaller trials showed some positive results. The magic of the Northern Lights, a very special view ahead on Mid-Morning. A spy jet from the Cold War has a new mission, and you can't beat the view. Off we go with Jim Axelrod.
When a pilot is jetting along at 500 miles per hour, 70,000 feet above the earth, you might think their full attention is on the flying. But look at these pictures. Thank goodness Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Ross Francomont can multitask. Piloting a U-2 high-altitude reconnaissance plane over Canada last month, the 40-year-old was screaming across the sky when he realized the green lights swirling around his plane and reflecting into his cockpit were the Northern Lights. An amateur photographer who carries his Nikon 750D in the cockpit along with his kid stuffed animals, he'd captured pretty pictures from the air before, but he knew the Aurora Borealis, as the lights are also known, was a jaw-dropper.
On display in Moscow, the wreckage of pilot Francis Power's U-2 reconnaissance plane.
The U-2 first made headlines in 1960 when Francis Gary Powers was shot down in one over Soviet airspace, creating a highly tense international incident. But Lieutenant Colonel Francomont's U-2 moment is creating nothing but joy. Maybe a picture is worth 1,000 words. On the other hand, sometimes all you need is one. Wow. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, New York.
If you think we've said all we're going to say about basketball for this season, you're kind of wrong. Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey is moving from the basketball court to stage. He's producing a new basketball-themed musical with a local theater company. Jason Bristol goes backstage.
What's up? His biggest deals include superstar players and million-dollar contracts. But Daryl Morey finds himself in this room thanks to one simple offer. Too interesting to pass up.
Yeah, it's pretty ironic. I mean, I do think, people who are a little bit into logic and math are into music, so that might be the connection.
It's not just music. Here at the Catastrophic Theater, it's a musical. And the Rockets' general manager is the producer. How does that happen?
I pitched him on the silliest idea of all time.
When he's not pitching or directing, Jason Nodler is obsessing over basketball.
Well, it begins with my having been a Rockets fanatic for life.
Jason invited Daryl to a play. After learning Daryl had mentioned on Twitter his other dream job was theater director, because he's loved the arts since
middle school, and I went to Les Mis. I was blown away, and forevermore I was stuck on it.
I went to his Facebook page. I thought I'll never hear back.
Now Daryl's a member of the board here.
Have you ever seen that show Camp?
And that's enough of that story. Let's get on to this one. Small ball. That silly idea, years in the making, now hitting the stage. And without giving away too much of the plot, it's a comedy.
How does it feel being Michael Jordan?
It feels
great. Based on that not-so-great feeling of sitting through a losing team's press conference.
You have failed, and now you're being asked, why did you fail?
I have something to do with that a lot of times.
I'm sure you do. Well, it's the job.
Daryl's job makes him a busy man, as you can see. And naturally, he downplays the role he plays.
Write the checks, you know, buy pizza.
But the people we talk to
He's a cool guy, yeah.
say he is much more than that.
He makes his concerns known. He trusts us to be the professionals.
He knows music really well, and he thinks really well about how songs work.
Landing the ideal playwright, finding composers and actors, and with sellouts expected every single night, math and logic will tell you Daryl Morey is building another winner.
It's really good. I mean, I couldn't be happier, so.
And that should be music to these ears.
They make you say just how you feel.
And if you're in the Houston area, you can catch the show for the next 2 months. Well, his songs span generations. Now his poems are being set to music. The words of Johnny Cash ahead on Mid-Morning. Welcome back. Johnny Cash performed his first #1 hit, I Walk the Line, on his network TV show. It's just one of his more than a dozen chart-topping songs. Cash died in 2003, but newly discovered poetry from the legendary musician was used to create a new album that's out this week. Some popular artists helped Cash's songs find a voice. Anthony Mason visited Cash's son outside Nashville, Tennessee, to hear the collaborations.
He built the Cash cabin here just as a place to rest and relax.
Johnny Cash's cabin is nestled at the back of the family property in Hendersonville, Tennessee.
So this was kind of a refuge for your family and your dad. My father called this property Cedar Hill Refuge.
In his last years, Johnny Cash built a studio inside. And it's here that John Carter Cash has put some of his father's poems to music, with help from artists like Brad Paisley and Casey Musgraves and her husband Rustin Kelly,
We are the walking.
and Johnny's daughter, Roseanne Cash.
We are the walking wounded.
What made you want him to put his poetry to music?
Oh, the words called out on the page. They just begged out really to me to be heard.
Johnny Cash wrote constantly. Letters, lyrics, poetry. The family found hundreds of pages after his death.
I'm struck by the fact that he kept all this.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was a pack rat, my father was. But you know, I mean, words meant the world to my dad. I mean, if you look at 200 pieces by any artist that are cast aside, you're going to find some gems within those, and that's what these are.
After publishing Forever Words, the unknown poems, in 2016,
Can you give us a sample?
Certainly.
Cash began looking for musical collaborators.
How did you feel to be asked?
Oh, I was thrilled to be asked. I was hoping I'd be asked.
Yeah.
Because I'd heard about the project, and
Yeah.
I was like, Daddy is a sailor.
Country artist Alison Krauss, who's won 27 Grammys, worked with songwriter Robert Lee Castleman to finish Cash's The Captain's Daughter.
It's like, I don't want to say holy ground, but it is.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, you really want to do it, but you really don't because you're afraid.
There's a
And-
responsibility that comes
Oh, a
with it.
huge one.
Yeah.
And the biggest one is to be honorable.
Cash also reached out to Chris Cornell before his tragic death last May.
He told me then, you know, that Dad was one of his greatest influences.
I'm gonna break my rusty cage and run.
Johnny had recorded Cornell's song Rusty Cage in 1996.
You never really knew my mind.
The Soundgarden frontman picked Cash's You Never Knew My Mind.
My father wrote You Never Knew My Mind in 1967 when he was going through a breakup with his first wife, Vivian. And Chris also connected intimately with his own experience to finish the song that my father had started.
It would be one of Cornell's last recordings.
I never really knew your mind.
The songs span Johnny Cash's life, from his teenage years to just before his death in 2003, when he was mourning the recent loss of his wife, June.
My father was persistent, man.
Yeah.
He, you know, people say, did your dad die of a broken heart? I know he died with one, but I don't think it killed him.
Mm-hmm.
I think he'd still be making music with us today, you know, if his body hadn't given out.
You tell me that I must perish, like the flowers that I cherish.
The song Forever comes from one of the last poems Johnny Cash wrote, performed by his old friends Chris Christopherson and Willie Nelson.
But the trees that I planted still are young. The songs I sang will still be sung.
And we will be right back to wrap things up. Be sure you stay connected with us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you back here next time.